Thanks everybody for joining. I know a lot of attendees are still jumping in, but we will start aware of time. My name is Walter Candelu. I'm the Secretary General for the Security Professionals Association. And we welcome everybody for the webinar of today with the Security Middle East magazine. We are going to discuss a very hot topic now in the market, which is the AI, how AI is aiding and supporting the operations of smart cities and securing our cities. With us, we have Daniel Norman, James Connolly, and Keven from Irisity. James Connolly will discuss about how AI is supporting the cybersecurity space, while Keven from Irisity will be introducing and discussing how AI is aiding the physical security installations. I think we are ready to go. I would like to give a couple of words about the Security Professionals Association and our initiatives. So I would like to thank our chairman, Mr. Khalid Al-Ahmadi, who made this possible. We are an association that is supporting the security industry in the Middle East, but also beyond. We have strong interest also from the European market, and we do initiatives like this webinar. We do have a lot of contributions and articles. They've been posted in the Security Middle East magazine. And what we want to do is we want to create a link between the agencies, the governmental agencies, the regulatory bodies, and the market, to make sure that we that the industry, the security industry, can really benefit from our networking opportunities. We have initiatives also like the workshop with SIRA that are happening almost on a monthly basis. And we would like to highlight that the association is as good as our members want it to be. So we welcome all our members to provide a contribution, a feedback, comment, ideas. We are all trying to help the security industry. We all understand that alone we won't be able to do anything. So we welcome our members to contribute to the extent that they can. So please feel free to drop us an email. Maybe Isra, our administrator, can put out the email at the end of the webinar. Reach out, let us know how you can contribute, you can help, and we'll be happy to listen and to help you achieve what you want to achieve. So without further ado, I will leave the stage to Daniel. He will be the moderator. He's a normal contributor to the Security Professionals Association and the Security Middle East magazine. So thank you, Daniel. And I wanted to thank everybody for attending the webinar, and will remain available. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, Walter. And I must say your background is far more pretty than mine. I'm in Norway at the moment, everyone. So yeah, it's quite dull and grey. But look, really looking forward to being involved once again with the Security Middle East and Security Professionals Association collaboration within this space. Artificial intelligence is one of those topics that's just gripped not only the security community, but I would say organizations globally, from governments through to multinationals. It's clear there are a significant number of opportunities from artificial intelligence, but a number of threats. And using a platform like this to collaborate, to share theories, best practice, and to identify what good looks like is one of the unique selling points of these types of communities. So really excited to introduce the two speakers today that have a significant amount of pedigree in this space. Our first speaker is James Connolly. He is the Director of Strategic Engagements at Darktrace. He's going to be looking at AI and essentially leveraging AI, using AI to drive autonomous response in security. So looking at the other side of the coin, using AI to potentially fight the bad guys. And our second speaker is Keven. He is the CEO at Irisity. Lots of experience as well in this space. And again, following on from James's presentation, he's going to be looking at some of the opportunities and threats associated with artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks and whatnot. And essentially how the Middle East can leverage these technologies, as well as being sort of aware of the threats that may manifest over the next few years. My name's Dan Norman. I am the sort of chair for the Security Middle East magazine, frequent contributor, but my day job is the regional director for the ISF, which essentially does a lot of what Walter and the team are doing here. We are a global association of member organizations, bringing together organizations from Europe, Middle East, Africa, US, all across the world to discuss hot topics, to develop best practice to manage potential cyber risk and to collaborate. So really looking forward to this. Really looking forward to seeing and hearing firsthand the presentations from James and Keven. If anyone has any questions, please do pop them in the chat. I will be asking some questions after each presentation. We have about 15 minutes per deck and then around 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the presentation for formal questions. So we will endeavour to get to them. And as always, enjoy it, take notes, ask the challenging questions. You've got the experts on the call today, so make the most of it. But without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to James Connolly. Please do share your screen. And
brilliant. Thank you, Dan. And good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Great to be part of this webinar today. Yeah, really passionate topic of mine, and obviously Darktrace with regards to AI really, and how that's having an impact generally across security. And I guess, in terms of our field and what we focus on, cybersecurity. As just a brief introduction, as you can see, my name is James. I'm actually one of the early members of the Darktrace Middle East office. So about 4 years ago, Darktrace decided to open an office in the Middle East, in Dubai, where there was about sort of 5 or 6 of us working in an apartment with a whiteboard. And since then, we've grown to over 30 people with our Middle East head office here in Dubai, down at Marina Gate, by the way. So if any of you are in Dubai Marina or you're passing by, please do let me know. And we'd love to have you in for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something. Today, I'm going to be talking about response. So there's a lot in terms of AI generally in the market with regards to detection, different approaches. More than happy to answer questions in that field if you'd like. But one of the big areas that we often get asked about is actually, how do you use AI for response, and what is the value of that? And then, of course, what are the risk factors with that as well? I'm first just going to talk about the modern kind of threat landscape and what we're seeing in the marketplace and the challenges that we find, particularly in security. The first one, we're all aware of, the geopolitical cyber conflict. I think it was back in 2021 where the United States of America sort of basically announced that any attack with regards to like cyber attacks on obviously critical national infrastructure or the country itself would be deemed an act of terrorism. So this is really being sort of looked at a very at the highest level with obviously a really serious focus on it, and we can talk about that in more detail. The second one, you guys probably have seen this in the news. with regards to software supply chain attacks. So what we've seen is in basically attack groups looking at the supply chain going into organizations from a software and technology point of view. How can we infiltrate that to therefore infiltrate the organization? So it's not just your defenses, it's actually how vulnerable the software and the products and the services that you're consuming as an organization can be. Really quite a novel approach, you know, with regards to how that software supply chain operates, and then obviously kind of compromising that, and therefore compromising a lot of organizations at the same time. Insider threat is a really interesting one. Obviously, as we came out of the COVID pandemic, work patterns and how people do their work changed drastically, and a lot of different organizations are on different stages of the journey with regards to that now. A lot have just remained remote and said, actually, remote working works for us. Others are way back into the office and just back to sort of where they were. With these changes of working patterns, what's happened, it's led to what we call the Great Resignation. So a lot of people saying, well, I actually like working remotely, or I want to spend more time with my family or on personal things, so I'm going to resign. That's a socio-economic trend, but what that creates is obviously a risk with regards to privileges. If you're on the inside, you manage a lot of very sensitive data, documents, etc. So that's something to be really wary of. And then the final one, I'm sure you guys have seen this, of course, again in the news, ransomware. Unfortunately, ransomware continues to be on the rise. One of the reasons for that is that there's a use of machine learning on the attack side. So basically, hackers and attack groups are using AI themselves. And we've seen, obviously, in the news recently, you know, ChatGPT, you know, really interesting technology, but sometimes, you know, how can AI be used for bad purposes as well? And again, particularly on sort of backup servers, cloud infrastructure as well. So there's a lot of organizations being targeted as well. And then the right-hand side, you know, you can just see some key statistics that we've summarized there. The top right one is really interesting. You know, security professionals still feel that there's quite a lot of gaps in their own cyber posture, which is pretty interesting. So that's just to really sort of set the scene. When we look at the market, so basically solutions that can help in defense, we tend to find quite a common approach and a common theme, and that's a reliance on rules, on signatures, on basically looking backwards. And we've called this at Darktrace the rear view mirror approach. So you'd never drive your car through the rear view mirror. If you did, you'd probably have an accident pretty quickly. We find that a lot of solutions still are quite reliant on this. So looking at known threats, known attacks, and then writing software to look for those known threats. Whereas at Darktrace, we've actually come from a different approach, which we'll talk about in a second. My talk today is about response, and the final point's really, really interesting. So even now, when we work with security teams, we find that a lot of the responses either tend to be quite sort of timid, so not sort of, they don't take too much action, but then others can just sort of take devices and areas and subnets completely off of the network and quite aggressive. So it's finding that the best kind of balance with regards to response as well. So at Darktrace, and this is an example, it's a fantastic example. It's actually on our blog. So if you guys have got a few minutes this afternoon or during the course of this week, I'd grab a coffee and have a read of this on our blog. Really fascinating case study. At Darktrace, what we do, we've actually come from a background of mathematics from the University of Cambridge in the UK. And we've sort of basically looked at, well, we're not going to look at known threats or known attacks. We're basically just going to learn a really deep pattern of life for a environment, and that could be a network environment, it could be email, it could be SaaS. And what the technology does is it learns a really deep sort of pattern of life. What is normal? We call it the digital DNA, and then we look at mathematical anomalies that are outside of that as well. And then, of course, we have the response capability to respond against those anomalies. This is a real case study with an organization we were working with in the Middle East. They were doing a proof of value with Darktrace. And they were very busy. You know, they were like, look, you know, we know you're doing the reports, and you know, it's quite interesting, but we're just quite busy at the moment. And we just said, look, guys, we are seeing some really unusual things in your environment. The attack on this organization actually took place in December 2018. But if we just take a few steps back, you can start to see the alerts that Darktrace was detecting within this organization. And obviously we were sort of covering these with the customer. Unfortunately, as this progressed, there was then a full-scale attack, as I say, in December. But what's really interesting here is what the AI is picking up. And these are just very subtle changes, you know, kind of a new admin credential, you know, there's a sort of unusual credential use, some network scanning. Usually these are lost in the busyness of a modern network, whereas with our approach at Darktrace, using AI, we were able to detect those kind of small, subtle anomalies. And that's generally the sort of the timeline there. Again, the blog post there, I won't go into too much detail on this webinar today. I know we have other speakers and other areas to cover, but this is just a really good example. This is actually from their version of Darktrace, by the way, so we haven't kind of, you know, sort of altered this in any way. But as you can see, there was basically a detonation point where there was 42 devices that then detonated with Shamoon 3 malware. For you guys that are not familiar with Shamoon 3, it's a very, very aggressive malware, so file deleting. So not ransom based or anything like that, just literally aggressively running through an organization and deleting files forever. So if you can think about the valuable documents and data and things like that, they're just gone if you were victim to this malware. And again, this is just a screenshot to kind of show that basically all of those alerts happening at the same time at this point in December. And then again, the timeline just before on the slide shows you that sort of that lead up. Again, more than happy to talk about this in more detail, or if you'd like, check out the blog post as well. Just to talk a little bit about response in with AI. There's basically, if you're looking at using AI for response, we would recommend looking at 3 different kind of levels for this. Firstly, we would sort of call this a kind of like a passive approach, a passive mode, where, for example, with our technology, it would be detecting things that would be, you know, they would be relevant for action, but actually no action is being taken. So there's a bit of a log, there's a bit of a history of what the technology would have blocked, and we call that passive mode. Again, if you did a trial with us or check the technology out, that's a way of just building up that sort of that trust to see this is what the technology would have blocked. The second one, and probably the most common with our customers, is what we call human confirmation mode. So again, in this area, I'd recommend to look at solutions that are configurable and can take response in different areas and environments and at different times. Quite a few of our customers, for example, they'll have human confirmation mode on during office hours, where the technology pops up, say, we want to take an action, is this okay, yes or no? And then the human can then confirm, yes, that's fine. And then outside of working hours, that's where, you know, the human confirmation is not there. And then obviously you've got that autonomous response, taking action for the team. And then the final point is fully autonomous mode as well. So, you know, tailoring the actions and taking actions, you know, automatically for the security team. I would say with the customers that we've worked with, this is a, you know, a stage approach. We do find some clients, they're just mature in this area, they get it, they're like, that's fine. Others are a bit like, we just want to start with detection first and then just do a bit of a trial around response. I'd just say at the bottom there is that always make sure that, when using autonomous technologies, the real, I think the value in this area is how configurable those technologies are and how specific you can basically tailor it for your own organization, which is really, really important. Just to summarize, for those that have met us and spoken with us, you guys are probably familiar with this. When Darktrace first started, we were really sort of in mainly the detect and the response areas, where we were helping organizations detect cyber threats, and then we had that response capability. But as we've grown, we have basically added both the prevent area, which is a fascinating area, by the way. Again, I highly recommend to check that out. And then, of course, heal, which is going to be coming soon as part of our AI loop. And what we're trying to do here is basically use AI to create a loop for your organization. So prevent is really helping detect and respond to threats, or detect threats outside of what I'd call outside of the castle walls. So what's happening outside of the organization? What are the risks there? What are the sort of riskier domains, etc.? Detect and respond we spoke about, and then heal is actually where, exactly as it says there, where the AI is kind of helping you heal, basically. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that to give you a little bit of context on our AI loop. So I hope that helps. And these are my contact details. So as I say, I'm based in Dubai, and if you guys would ever want to meet or find out more, this is some of my details to get in touch. So yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. I hope it's been useful and interesting with regards to response using AI. And yeah, are there any questions?
Thank you, James. Just one quick question from myself about this presentation. And what we've seen in the ISF with organizations is there's a degree of, I would say, reluctance when looking to deploy autonomous responses when it comes to AI. But what is your advice in ensuring business continuity when using AI-based autonomous solutions?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a common question that we get as well. I think what's tempting, I mean, obviously with us being an AI company as well, what's very tempting is to dive into the technology and kind of go technology first and let's talk about the tech. What I'd probably do is I would take a step back and think about how security operations are run for your particular organization and why. So what is the security strategy? Is that going to be internally managed? Is it going to be externally managed? Is there going to be a mix of that, which sometimes can be quite common? So how does actually security operations run? We work with a lot of clients where they'll say, well, actually, we outsource most of our security operations, but we'd like something like Darktrace to just give us that internal visibility and response with the autonomous response. Others are very much like, we've got an internal team, we've got an internal security operations center, they're internal employees, and they are given solutions like Darktrace. So number one, I would outline your security strategy and how security operations are run, and write that down, on a piece of paper or something, because that can be very, very helpful. So you've got that clear framework. And then, as I mentioned there, I would probably gradually work upwards as well. So work with technologies and providers that can help you work up a sliding scale. So not just diving in and responding to things and taking device off the network, etc., but basically solutions where it can be configured and you guys can gradually build up your maturity model. Because I do think when it comes to AI, particularly response, there's a level of maturity, and different organizations are at different levels. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think the variety of members at the ISF that we speak to will be sort of global multinationals with resources that can monitor, embed, leverage these tools. And sort of without that sort of baseline of maturity, it's not impossible, but it's more of a challenge, I would say, to implement technologies like this. But I would certainly echo that it's just a matter of time, really, before all organizations begin leveraging technologies like this, because the speed of attacks and the diversity of the attacks just outpace and outstrip the abilities of humans to not only monitor but respond in a timely manner. So it seemed inevitable to me. But yeah, look, I'll save the rest of the questions for after Kevin's presentation. I've got a few left here, but some of the points that Keven brings out in his presentation might add a bit more clarity and alternate perspectives.
So first of all, thank you for including us in today's presentation and the great work that's being done with the Surveillance Security Professional Association. It's these types of associations that help bring best practices and common methods to solve problems that we are all working to solve. And today, the topic around artificial intelligence and analytics today is a great topic, and I appreciate being able to do that. And I'm based in Gothenburg, in Sweden, where Irisity is headquarters. I live in Copenhagen, in Denmark, and it's where I'm calling you from today. And what we wanted to talk about today was where is all of the hype and the discussions going around video analytics and AI, and how can you start preparing your own deployments and your own organizational expectations and needs. So that's what I'd like to cover today. So one of the things that we see today in surveillance systems, and I, from my previous work, spent 10 years working for Milestone Systems here in Denmark, which is a leading provider of video management systems. And I have just recently joined to be the CEO at Irisity. And Irisity is a company that has been in business selling artificial intelligence since the very beginning days in 2005. And one of the things that we have seen in development over the past 10 years is that cities are adding more and more surveillance technology with companies like Milestone or Genetec, and that they're really growing the number of cameras that they're deploying. And as they do this, the challenges that they're facing of how much data they're collecting can be met or can be mitigated with the addition of real-time automated video analytics. And the difference between the video analytics of today and in the past is that we're using artificial intelligence, aka CNN models, deep learning models, in order to help identify anomalies that are happening within the camera's field of view. And this is what we do with our product, Irisity's Iris Plus. But the challenge, and when you look at all of the video images and data being collected, is just that it's so vast and it's not intelligent. So it becomes humanly impossible to manage these systems. And I don't want to do some of this math to show you that. And that is why the advancements in artificial intelligence have been key to the end users and the operators who are sitting with these complex environments and that are dealing with all of the data that's being collected, and in the almost the impossible task to find the particular anomalies that you're looking for. So with the development of AI, the solutions have become much smarter with the introduction of deep learning and neural networks, and that we have found a way to deploy that technology as an addition to your existing. So we look at that. I want to kind of present to you the problem that when we talk about the vast amount of data, and this is a very simple calculation that presents the problem. And the problem is that if you don't do the math, then you don't really understand why your city surveillance project or other types of deployment needs artificial intelligence. And now I start with just the very basics on the left here, that the typical video management system that you're deploying or you're working with, you have a number of cameras, you've set some sort of standard on frames per second. We all have to deal with the fact that there's 86,400 seconds in every single day in every part of the world. You might have a standard of recording. Let's say that's very common in the Middle East to have 100% recording requirements for city surveillance projects, and you may be required to keep that storage for 30 days. And that by itself doesn't seem like a real problem and kind of every day. But if you calculate that out per camera, what that basically means is that if one camera doing 30 frames per second in one day will produce 2.592 million images per day. That's 2.59 million images. If you record that 100% for 30 days, that means one camera in 30 days will produce 77.7 million images. The ability to search through that data is not humanly possible, especially if there are any time constraints, such as an emergency situation. So one camera produces 77 million images per day. At just a one camera view, you really need AI. But if you typically look at it in a city surveillance, you most likely have more than 1,000 cameras. So if we just take the simple math and we expand that out, that means a 1,000 camera city surveillance system, which is doing 30 frames per second is going to produce 30,000 frames per day, is going to produce 2.5 billion images per day. If you record that 100% and you keep that recording for 30 days, you will have accumulated 77.7 billion images in one city surveillance project. It's inhumane to think that you'll be able to find the needle in that haystack of images. That is an incredibly challenging task, which is why companies like Irisity have built the technology to extract that metadata and be able to, in real time, be able to give you the ability to search through those 77 billion images to find exactly what you're looking for. And that is why city surveillance systems and or other deployments of this size need artificial intelligence. It's very simply done in the math. If you look at that today, because so many of the cities are building out these digital platforms, building, in effect, these smart city brains, we can provide a holistic view now of how that's looking at, and we can correlate those events much, much faster. And it's important to realize that if you do this in real time per second, versus if you do it in another way where you do it forensically, you have to reprocess all that video to do a forensic search. Where we think it's much more efficient to be able to do event correlation in real time, to do the metadata extraction at the beginning of the value chain, at the point of the digitalization of the camera's video. And we see this event correlation becomes very, very, very powerful if it can be done in real time. And it allows back-end systems to do forensic or other event correlation to look for root cause analysis and to move us from a reactive situation to more of a predictive analysis. And this then creates a much more prepared response for incidents and provides much better operational insights and operational effectiveness through the visualization of this data. Artificial intelligence really provides the capability for video to provide supported and sustainable strategies for your urban environments through this real-time information collection. And we at Irisity Plus are there to help you. From an example of this, if we look at this challenge around how can we look at these urban management scenarios that you're facing, from city planning or other types of traffic routing or traffic management type solutions, this is a perfect example of the fact that the decision makers, once sitting looking through these 77 billion images, can be able to do the modeling to get us to a predictive situation. And that's a key aspect we see for today's analytics within city surveillance systems. So very briefly, the smart AI city surveillance systems from a video standpoint, coupled with the other technologies, such as anonymization, where in some parts of the world, it's more important to provide anonymization capabilities with the video surveillance. And this is something we have patented at Irisity. And anonymization is an important aspect because all surveillance systems start out anonymous. And when we start applying AI, we start to de-anonymize that video. We start adding metadata to that. And privacy and other types of data protection become very important, as you heard from the other speaker, about the cybersecurity aspects. That we are creating hugely valuable, insightful information that we also need to be able to protect, because with this great power also demands great responsibility in the data management. We see a great opportunity now to embrace this technology and move forward. And here's my contact information if you're interested to learn more about us. We are a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ in Stockholm. We are a very solid company for the past 20 years, and I'm sure we could help you with your future needs.
A couple of questions from my side before we jump into the questions from the audience. We've heard a lot of presentations over the last, I'd say, year or so about smart cities and sort of the expected digital transformation and the amount of data being gathered and the potential benefits that this could usher in. In your opinion, what are the features that have to be considered for a safe smart city, and how can AI be part of that solution?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question on features. And if I just zoom out just a little bit, I'm a big believer that we have to first look at the purpose before we look at the product or the features. And the purpose is more important. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? And the purpose often for smart cities is to reduce cost. It's to protect the assets that the city has. It's to protect the citizens. It's to ensure that they feel safe and can invest in their daily lives and the life and society that they're building. So I think it's always important to start with the purpose before we dive into the features. And the second aspect of this is that there is an infrastructure that has been built around these cities. That infrastructure is installed. It has been there for a while, and it is not very intelligent. It is digital, but it is not very intelligent. I would actually call it maybe even dumb. And in the building out of this infrastructure, there are 4 laws that often have to be understood. There's the law of the land, where the infrastructure has to be built to the local laws. The second part of the infrastructure, the second law that needs to be understood, is the law of physics, that you cannot probably get 1,000 cameras of video off the ground and into the cloud. That is generally a challenge, at least not all of it at once, especially when you look at 77 billion images. That's a lot of data. The third law that really is important, that really challenges a lot of cities today, is the law of economy. That there's an economic aspect, that the infrastructure is built and we need to use that infrastructure for a number of years because its life cycle is someplace between 5 and 10 years. But the last piece, the most important thing that to address features is Murphy's Law, the one that just in case something happens. And then most infrastructure has been built and optimized for Murphy's Law. So when we then talk about features and in the view of the purpose and the 4 universal laws, then what I really would say is the features that you need are ones that you can afford. They're features that are legal. They're features that are physical. You can deploy them, and that they're the features that deal with the Murphy's Law that you're dealing with, the situation that you probably need to assess. And then from that, I think you can find the right technologies that you can add. I think Irisity has some of those technologies to address those 4 laws to help achieve the purpose of your smart cities system.
Fantastic, thank you. A very thorough answer there. I'd love to welcome back James to the call as well. So if us 3 keep our screen shared, we can dive into some of the questions from the audience and go from there. So I can see a couple of questions that have come in, and a question here from Mohammed. I think it's a very relevant question as well. So I'll ask this to James first, because I think with the expertise from sort of the protective element that Darktrace brings in, it's probably very well positioned to answer this. And the question is, for now, what are the risks and threats that need to be taken into account in the implementation of AI into an organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think probably the main one when looking at your security portfolio is believing that it is the silver bullet, and that's it. Just throw a bit of AI in there, and it's all going to be okay. I think the most valuable conversations I have with our customers is, I kind of mentioned it earlier, like what is their security strategy? How does the board view risk and cyber risk? What are the main areas that they're worried about? Was there, we don't have to go into details, but was there an incident that has prompted them to look at maybe AI and taking that one step further with regards to AI? So I think firstly, it's not just purely going down the tech route and saying, well, because we've got an AI solution now, we're going to be fine, it's going to be okay. I think it's really defining that strategy and how security operations run, and then the technology adds value to that. The other thing I'd also say is probably around skills. So it's quite tempting to put AI in and go, great, this is just going to do the job for us. At Darktrace, we do a lot of that. So we save a lot of time for the security team to get to the key areas of risk. That autonomous response, obviously, if that's not there, then the remediation and that recovery work takes a lot of time, etc. So it's identifying those small early risks and then dealing with them and saving a lot of time, but also having the skills to really push the boundaries of AI and machine learning as much as possible. I'd definitely say, so probably number one, security strategy, number two, operations and how that runs, and then number three, the actual skills and understanding, I'd say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so Keven, what are your, I guess, initial thoughts with what James has said there? What do you think the best approach would be to embarking on a AI implementation?
Well, I think, as I mentioned before, you first have to have a purpose. What is the problem that is worthy of solving that you're trying to solve? And if you don't have a clear understanding of the solving of the problem or the problem you want to solve, adding AI is not going to help you. That'll make it worse, actually. So the second thing that I would say is, after you've determined that there's a problem worthy of solving, is to then start looking at it in a feasibility experimentation, to start with a test. Can we solve this problem? And often we look at it by buying the entire solution before we have actually proved that we can solve the problem. I think a very pragmatic way to do that is to start a small proof of concept, to start determining have you solved the problem, and maybe you've even identified additional problems, to adapt your way through that. I think the other aspect of this, in this crawl, walk, run approach, is to then start to say, how can I scale this out to be bigger? And in the scaling part, you have to also identify what is the role that the human will play in this process. Often thought about as the human in the loop. And in the surveillance system, we have a human in the loop, and that's the operator working behind the consoles. And you have to not only define what the AI problem could solve, but you have to also define what role the human in the loop will play in solving that problem. And then the run part of the phase, starting to deploy it at scale. This is another learning phase and journey that you have to be on. And this is a very important phase where you now need to start understanding how the data is coming back to specialists who can understand on how to best model and make use of that data. And when you look at this math example of 77 billion images, if you've never looked at 77 billion images, then you've built an infrastructure that is very expensive, that is dumb, and is probably not an asset for you. It's probably a liability. And this is an important aspect, that just because you can build it doesn't mean that it will do something for you. And that is very much the case, that we have often built these systems for Murphy's Law. And we need to become less dependent on the thinking of Murphy's Law, just in case. And we need to start thinking about the law of the land, the law of economy, and the law of physics.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, it's a good point there. I think I think the attraction to investing in AI-backed infrastructure has sort of medium to long-term implications. It's clear that if you set it up well, you have the right sort of governance in place, good people monitoring, and it's deployed effectively, then you should be able to reap the benefits over a few months or years. But my follow-up question is, and I can point this towards James actually, is do you have any examples of sort of immediate return on investment for autonomous response, or even AI in general, something that's sort of quick, instant feedback, instant ROI?
Yeah, well, that's the name of the game, you know, as Keven said there. You know, you don't want to end up with a very sophisticated solution that's cost lots of money and then not being an asset for you. So a good one is we were working with, I'll tell you a quick story. We're working with an organization in Saudi Arabia. They were a holding group, so they've got multiple different businesses. And one day they were having just an email conversation with their supplier that was based overseas. And then just during this conversation, literally the same email addresses, etc., there was an email from the supplier that said, guys, please, we need this order that we're talking about, this invoice, it needs to be paid urgently. We've got a new bank account. Please pay the order, the amount for the order as soon as possible to this bank account. Really difficult for humans to detect that was actually a phishing attack. And unfortunately, the sums were paid. That then prompted that organisation to look at different solutions out there. So email in particular is a very, very common market. There's a lot of solutions out there. Whereas at Darktrace, we use AI to, again, coming from that background of mathematics, to learn a real deep understanding of what is a normal email communication flow outside the organization, going into the organization, within the organization. How do people usually communicate? When do they usually communicate? That kind of thing. So with the technology learning a really deep understanding of that, we then went forward with this customer. They had a very, very similar email, another same sort of conversation going on. And thankfully, Darktrace's email solution was able to detect and stop that. So you have immediate ROI. I think that was in month 4 of the contract, over a 3-year contract. And if that had have been paid, it would have been more of the original Darktrace contract. That makes sense. So you've already got ROI there. Sure. So that's one we're pretty proud of. Yeah.
Brilliant. I can
see a couple of questions.
On
that, just a question through.
Yeah, please.
There was a question posted in the comments about a similar set of recording capabilities, doing recording not on motion, but instead doing recording on real-time event anomaly detection. And I want to just kind of answer that, because the question coming from the audience was exactly correct, that there is a significant reduction in the number of images that you are recording when you're using AI as the recording decision-making tool, aka not using Murphy's Law. And the immediate savings that you have is in your storage infrastructure. And we can mathematically show you how you could save 90 to 95% of your storage budget and the ongoing electrical operating expenses, especially these days, which are dramatically more expensive to operate these infrastructures, that you have immediate return from day one. And these calculations are important to do the math on how much that storage of 77 billion images in my example is costing you just in electric cost to operate. And we see an immediate cost savings today by adding our software layer into this solution.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I was just about to ask you that question, Keven, as I saw it come in. So yeah, thank you for covering that one. I can see another one in the Q&A box. Might point this one towards James, actually. It says, what about hardware attacks leveraging AI? Are you seeing hardware style attacks happening now, or is it mainly based on software? Or is the threat landscape so wide now that anything's up for grabs?
Yeah, it can come from quite a few different angles. I mean, generally, you know, when we think about hardware, the good thing with hardware and hardware-heavy infrastructures is that you can get a good data capture. So usually, when we're working in a large network, both in an IT environment or in smart city environments like what we'd call sort of OT, you know, there tends to be large amounts of infrastructure there that we can capture the data from. And that's really, again, if we look at really the early foundings of Darktrace, we actually kind of started in those networked environments because you could get a lot of traffic and data flow and then detect anomalies from that. And then I think what we've seen is, certainly more in the IT space, that more people have moved to remote working and using things like this, like Zoom and Teams and email. You know, we've developed technologies to cover those areas as well. And again, when we work with clients, one of the big pieces of feedback we get is that we can cover those multiple areas that customers really, really appreciate. The other great thing, just to briefly mention as well, an important thing actually to think about is when using these approaches, think about where that AI processing is taking place. So that's often quite an important question. And again, certainly when we work with different organizations, sometimes that's fine, whatever. Other organizations are like, you know, that is quite an important specific requirement for us. So again, to the audience, I recommend them to have a think about that as well and what their requirements are in that area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Keven, I've got a follow-up question for yourself, and it's around the smart city sort of municipality and city approaches here. But it's clear that lots of cities and municipalities have existing infrastructure, as you mentioned, and that comes with certain limitations. But what do you see for the future? So how can these municipalities and these cities actually prepare and sort of do the gap analysis and sort of review whether or not they can actually implement the technologies that you've taken us through? Are there any sort of lessons learned that you can provide to the audience here around how to embark on this journey?
Yeah, and thanks for the question. One of the things that we have learned over the past 20 years at Irisity is that you have to take it from the perspective that in not all technology is created equal. So you do need to have this established, you know, proven, customer referenced type technology before you start. So, and that's something that we have built very well over the past 20 years. So we have 20 years of experience learning about the early days of that it wasn't that accurate. There was a lot of false alarms or false negatives or positives, as they're referred to. But I think that just kind of gets into the details of what the cities are really looking to work with. I think if we abstract it up a bit, not at the product level, but again in the purpose level, is the cities are thinking about adding this technology to watch their citizens. And the citizens today are thinking, is that good for me or is that bad for me? Especially in countries like Europe or the EU, where you have technology, or you have regulations around new AI directives that are coming, GDPR about people's privacy. And they're starting to think about this and ask the questions because they can now see the cameras. They're everywhere. And they ask, is that good for me or is that bad for me? And I think it's important for municipalities to be very clear to their citizens, their residents, that this is good for them. And I think it's really important to ensure that the anonymous surveillance that's going on stays anonymous. And that if the cities do not get ahead of this narrative and cannot prove to their citizens that it is anonymous, then you're going to end up with a situation where the citizens will start to think that they're working or living within a surveillance state. And they'll start to develop less trust with their governments and their cities. So I think this is a really important part of the narrative that tracks to the purpose, to be very clear at why it is we're doing this, and be very clear about the data protection and the anonymization capabilities. This is why we looked over the years, and being based in Gothenburg and a Swedish-based company with offices all around the world, including Abu Dhabi, that we have the ability to provide an anonymization capability that can be shown to the governments that this is good for their citizens, while we can also still extract the metadata that provides the actions they necessary, the data necessary to fulfill their purpose for this solution. So I think it's really important to look at that citizens are thinking, is this good for me or is this bad for me?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, gentlemen, I can see the time is almost up. But I mean, we could talk about this topic for hours and hours. It's so multifaceted, multidimensional. But before we do wrap up, I'd love to give you an opportunity to summarize really where you think AI is going over the next 2 to 3 years, and what I guess your predictions are for industry, regulation, government, and implementation. So I'll go to James. James, what's your sort of feedback if you were to summarize where you think AI is going over the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, wow. Well, we think about that a lot, and obviously work a lot at Darktrace with regards to that. I think probably for us, it's really about how then AI could not only detect, respond, and reduce risk, but actually then optimize operations and get to a point where things can then, and I'm sort of thinking about the heal aspect and that focus for us, but, how do we start kind of relying on the machine learning to then make updates and changes for us? I think that, as well as what also is very important, is awareness of AI and that training we spoke about, and upskilling, and making sure, as we've both Keven and I spoke about, is making sure the strategy is outlined, and AI is either core to that or a big part of your security strategy. So yeah, that'll be my prediction.
Sure, thank you. And Keven, how would you summarize the challenges and opportunities that AI presents over the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, the challenge for the end customers is to determine when they start applying, and the when is important. It's not an if. The if is decided. It will happen. Just like we went from analog cameras to digital cameras, we went from standard resolution to multi-pixel, it will happen. The question is, when do you start applying it? And in this particular case, it's a regulated decision. So you need to be clear about the law of the land, because you are changing the capabilities of the solution quite significantly. And you need to work with a provider that is capable of being there long-term, but also has the experience to help guide the customer through their choices of when, where, and why. And the last part that I think you will see globally is that the municipalities and the cities are going to be looking to providers that have a stated vision on responsible use of this very powerful technology. And that responsible use needs to be clearly communicated in the end user licensing agreements, in the partner contracts, and in the post power on world of AI. Because when you turn it on, things won't be the same.
Yeah, it's quite a scary ending there, really. But yeah, it's clear AI is the benefits are here. I think we are living through an era at the moment where the implications and the sort of business benefits are clear to see, and it's an exciting time for not only the Middle East but the world, and across all different facets of AI. So I for one am very, very excited to see where this takes us. It's clear that your solutions are adding a lot of value to organizations globally. So yeah, I'd like to thank you both so much for your time today with the presentations and answering the questions here. I believe I'm going to welcome back Walter to summarize the session and provide some feedback and next steps. But from myself, thank you, James. Thank you, Keven, for your time. Really appreciate it. And I hope to see you all very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, Keven. Thank you, James. I hope you can see my screen. Before closing the webinar, I wanted to thank you, Dan, for the amazing work. As always, you're an amazing moderator. And wanted to thank the speakers for such an insightful conversation. I think, it's as you say, it's extremely exciting, the fact that we are moving. The artificial intelligence is moving into the security industry, and now with tangible values. Until last year, it was difficult to really understand what values were given for municipalities and cities, and now it is exciting to see this actually becoming a reality and more and actually start discussing about ROI is quite amazing. So thank you very much for bringing these topics up. Before closing, I wanted to give a couple of news. There was a newsletter out to all the members, but I wanted everybody to be reminded that the membership for the Security Professions Association has been, the fees have been waived, and it is free until the end of this year. The association has been funded and has been supported by SIRA, the Security Industry Regulatory Agency in Dubai. And when you join the association, there are several activities that we are taking. As discussed, we have workshops with SIRA, where we put together the regulatory agency with the public in specific topics. We have articles and in the publications of the Security Middle East magazines, where our members can contribute on a regular basis. We have webinars like this one, and we will try to make them more frequent as we move on. We are participating to events, and we give benefits to our members on participating to those events. And also we have benefits. All our members will have access with Emirates ID, will have access to the FASA card, and there will be more coming very soon. We have some surprises happening. For the registration to the SPA membership program, you can access the SIRA website. As you see here, there is an SPA registration link. Or you can reach us on the email you see down here. I hope that is visible for the members. In the same email, you can also send any suggestion, questions, or comments on the way we operate, or any suggestion on any new activity we should take on, or any willingness to contribute more. Please do give us your contribution. We are trying to make the security industry a better, give the security industry better visibility, and show the world what the security industry can offer for the good. Last, at the end of the webinar, you should have the possibility to fill up a survey where you will ask your opinion on this webinar, on the topics, and any preference for the future. So that is it from my side. I hope you had a good experience with this webinar. Again, thank you, Dan, and thank you, James and Keven, for the contribution. Thank you to all the team at the Security Professionals Association to make this possible, as well to the chairman, Khalid Al-Ahmadi. So thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day or morning, wherever you are. We are at your disposal if you need anything. Thank you and have a good day.